Breaking news, Carmelo Anthony's motion for new trial has been denied. And this is your host, Jay Carter with the Black Lawyers Podcast. And today I'll be breaking down that motion for new trial and also why I think it may have been denied. Let's get started. So before we get to why I think the motion for new trial was denied, let's talk about what the motion for new trial had in it. It essentially was split into three parts. The first part focused on the court improperly restricting public access to the actual trial. Now, why is this important? They talked about how the seating was limited. They required people to get up before dawn to access the trial. They eliminated even overflow for the courtroom. And obviously, they failed to provide audio and video of the trial. Obviously, there was no media that was allowed to actually film or record audio of the trial. And so the motion argues that those restrictions amounted to an unconstitutional courtroom closure without the findings required under Supreme Court precedent. And so that was their first argument, that the public did not really have access to this trial. The restricted public access argument actually poured into a secondary argument they had about the trial judge, who of course was recused from these particular proceedings about the motion for new trial. But at the time, he did a media interview saying that it was correct to restrict the public from this trial. So they said that just further supports that unconstitutional restriction of public access happened here, even with the trial judge agreeing with it and agreeing to restrict the public from the court without, again, following any sort of precedent. The second part of their argument focused on how the trial was improperly accelerated. If you recall, they even had court on Saturday for this trial, which is almost unheard of. And it just didn't give the defense a lot of time, over the weekend to really do any sort of proper follow-up defense that Carmelo actually needed. The third part of their argument was probably the strongest, and it talked about this gentleman's agreement allegedly that was left off the record, and it was between allegedly the prosecutors and Carmelo's defense attorneys that essentially said that they would keep all prior bad acts out and any sort of character evidence out. And so when it was revealed that Carmelo Anthony would use self-defense in his trial, meaning he would have to take the stand and speak, the prosecutors at the last minute went against their agreement and said, well, what we talked about is not going to apply to Carmelo if he takes the stand. And so, meaning they would talk about any prior bad acts and they would talk about any sort of character evidence against him. And so he literally had 10 minutes to decide if he was going to take that risk and take the stand anyway. And obviously he decided not to. This went into the other part of their argument, which talked about how because he could not take the stand in his defense without them opening up this can of worms against him, that the lack of his testimony essentially ensured that he would get a guilty verdict because this trial was all about self-defense. And so in this case, he really needed to take the stand to explain what happened. I just want to talk briefly about some of the things that were revealed. So in this motion for new trial, some of the stuff that they said that they would leave off the record were text messages talking about the KKK and using the N-word and them being suspended and using school slurs and putting graffiti using slurs. Some of the threatening text messages included, I'm going to kill that MF. I was about to beat the expletive out of those kids, and even gun threat texts where they were suspended after another student texted about them potentially bringing a gun to school. All of that was left out in exchange for Carmelo also having his alleged prior bad acts and messages left out. And some of the evidence included a stalking incident report from his ex-girlfriend who said that because they had broken up, he was still stalking her. And that there was also an image of a blade or a knife, and it was photographed along with the words, I'm low-key on the verge of the end, something along those lines. And so they said that they would leave all that out because that nor anything that the twins had done had anything to do with their interactions underneath the tent. But now it's come out in this motion for new trial. And so I don't know. I don't know what an appeal looks like now, even if they were able to get an appeal. So you may be wondering with all this why he was denied a motion for a new trial. Short answer is judges love to defer to juries. They assume that they looked at the facts and they came to the right argument, applying the rules, and also that he may have considered these to be minor errors. You also have to show that any sort of new evidence, it was impossible for you to bring it in at the new trial. That's an extremely high threshold. And so, with that being said, it's headed to the appellate court. Stay tuned. And this has been the Black Lawyers Podcast.